Kieran Sullivan had $32 in his wallet, a 4-year-old daughter asleep in the backseat, and one more job interview to bomb before the day was over. He parked his rusted-out Corolla in the grocery store lot, rubbing the tension from his eyes. Violet had spilled apple juice on his only decent shirt, and his scuffed boots squeaked with every step. He glanced at the rearview mirror and sighed. Back in 10 minutes, baby girl. She was out cold, her curls stuck to her forehead, still clutching her stuffed giraffe. The heat was creeping in, but the windows were cracked and he'd be fast. He never left her alone for long, not even for a bathroom break. Kieran jogged across the lot, weaving through carts when he saw her right next to the cart return, frozen mid-step. A woman in a pale blouse, her hands clutching her chest like her lungs were being stolen. Her eyes were wide with panic, mouth slightly open but silent. People were walking right past her. He didn't think he just moved. Hey, look at me, he said, crouching in front of her. You okay? She blinked at him, her breathing sharp and quick like she couldn't get air. Her hands shook. Okay, you're having a panic attack, he said gently, keeping his voice low. I've been there. Breathe with me, all right, in through your nose. Good, now out, you're safe. I'm right here. Her eyes welled up, but she followed his lead, mimicking his breaths. Good, that's it. You're doing great. They sat on the pavement for at least 3 minutes before her breathing slowed. She looked at him like he'd pulled her back from the edge of a cliff. I'm sorry, she whispered, brushing her hair out of her face. I didn't mean to. You don't have to apologize, he said. You're okay now. Her eyes were too bright, too sharp for someone who just panicked in public. She looked like she belonged in a magazine, long tan trench coat, delicate silver watch, high-end heels that definitely weren't from around here. I'm Clara, she said breathlessly, still clutching her chest. Kieran, he replied. You sure you're all right? She nodded, but her hands were still trembling. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. She hesitated, then took it, her grip soft but tight. Once she was on her feet, she wobbled. Sit in my car for a second, he offered. It's not fancy, but it's got AC. Clara looked like she might faint again, so she followed him without a word. When he opened the passenger door, she blinked at the child in the back seat. Oh, she whispered. That's Violet. She's out cold, he said with a tired smile. Had a long day. Clara sat down slowly, letting the cool air hit her face. You were just walking by. Yeah, saw you and figured I couldn't just keep walking. You didn't look okay. She closed her eyes. Thank you, seriously. I thought I was going to hit the pavement. He nodded, studying her a second longer. She didn't look like she belonged in this part of town. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket, but she ignored it. You hungry? He asked suddenly. There's a diner a block over. It's cheap, but they've got decent pancakes. Clara blinked. You're offering to buy me pancakes. I mean, it's either that or I go home and eat cold spaghetti from last night. I figured you'd be better company. For the first time, she smiled and it was soft, like it didn't know how to exist yet. All right, she said. Pancakes. He carried Violet inside, her head tucked against his shoulder, and placed her in a booth, her giraffe still clutched in one hand. Clara slid in across from him, eyeing the cracked leather seats and the laminated menu with a look of curiosity, not judgment. Are you sure this is okay? She asked. Clara, you just had a panic attack in a parking lot. Trust me, you've earned pancakes. The waitress came by, and Kieran ordered for both of them after Clara hesitated. When the food arrived, she stared at the stack of buttermilk pancakes like she didn't know what to do with them. I don't usually eat like this, she admitted. Too fancy for syrup, he teased. She laughed. No, just, usually someone else makes it for me. He raised an eyebrow. You got a personal chef or something? Clara paused, then shrugged. Something like that. The silence that followed was light, but it buzzed with something underneath. She didn't talk like someone used to being vulnerable. Her voice was calm, controlled, but her hands gave her away. Violet stirred and blinked up at Clara, then whispered. Who's that, Daddy? Kieran smiled softly. That's Clara. She's a friend. Clara looked startled for a moment, then smiled at the little girl. Hi, Violet. Violet studied her sleepy-eyed and then turned to her dad. Can she have a pancake? He chuckled. She already has one, sweetheart. Clara cut a piece with her fork and offered it to Violet. The little girl took it without hesitation, chewing thoughtfully. Good, she declared. Clara beamed like it was the best review she'd ever gotten. After they ate, Kieran walked them back to the car. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. "I should get going," Clara said softly. "But thank you again," he nodded. "Anytime." She hesitated, then reached into her coat pocket. "Can I give you something? If it's money, no, it's not," she said quickly. "Just this." She handed him a small silver card. It had only her name and a phone number. No title, no company. "I'd like to see you again," she said. Kieran blinked. "You sure?" Clara looked at him, then really looked. "I've never been more sure of anything." He tucked the card into his pocket, watching her walk away like she didn't just tip his whole world on its head. He didn't know she was a millionaire. He didn't know she was falling. But that night, when Violet curled up beside him on the couch and asked, "Is Clara gonna come over again?" he smiled to himself. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think she will." 3 days passed before Clara called. Kieran had just finished changing Violet's bedsheets after a juice spill and was elbow-deep in laundry detergent when the phone rang. He dried his hands on his jeans and picked it up with a cautious, "Yeah, it's Clara." Her voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of hesitation. "I was wondering if you were free today." He looked around the small apartment. The sink was full, there were crayons ground into the carpet, and Violet was in the middle of turning a cardboard box into a spaceship with a marker. "Depends," he said. "You allergic to chaos?" There was a pause, and then, "No. Actually, I think I'd like a little chaos." She arrived 20 minutes later, dressed in jeans and a navy blouse, her hair pulled back in a loose twist. This time she brought groceries, real ones, not boxed mac and cheese and canned soup. There were fresh strawberries, crusty bread, a block of cheese, a carton of eggs, and a bottle of something that looked too expensive to be juice. "You didn't need to do this," Kieran said, eyeing the bags. "I wanted to," Clara replied. "Besides, I wasn't sure what you liked, so I just grabbed things I'd want someone to bring me." Violet peeked out from behind the couch, her shirt streaked with marker. Clara crouched and offered her a strawberry from the carton. Violet took it, gave a suspicious look, then nodded solemnly before disappearing again. "She's busy building a spaceship," Kieran explained. "I'd love to see it," Clara said. He watched her move through his kitchen like she wasn't surrounded by mismatched plates and cabinets that didn't shut right. She unpacked the groceries with quiet ease, humming something under her breath. "Do you always show up with food?" he asked, leaning against the doorway. "Only when I'm nervous," she admitted. He blinked. "You're nervous? Why?" Clara glanced over her shoulder, then placed a loaf of bread on the counter. "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since the parking lot, and that's not something I planned for." Kieran wasn't sure what to say to that. In his world, people didn't confess things like that, not without an angle, but Clara didn't seem like she had one. She just looked at him like she was waiting for him to believe her. "You want coffee?" he asked instead, gesturing to the chipped machine on the counter. "I'd love one." They sat at the small table while Violet narrated the launch of her cardboard spaceship from the living room. Clara cradled the mug like it was keeping her grounded. "I Googled you," she said suddenly. Kieran's mouth froze mid-sip. "That's so?" Clara nodded. "I didn't find much, just your old construction license and a few local news blurbs from years ago. Not exactly headline material," he said. "I wasn't looking for headlines, I just wanted to understand." He set the mug down. "Understand what?" "Why someone with your kind of hands would offer comfort to a stranger without hesitation. And why you looked like you hadn't been asked how you were doing in a very long time." Kieran looked away. "You don't need to understand me, Clara." "Maybe I don't," she said softly, "but I want to." Violet climbed into his lap without warning and handed him a crayon. Clara watched them for a moment, her eyes softening. "What happened to her mom?" she asked gently. "Left. About a year after Violet was born. I'm sorry." He didn't say anything, just held his daughter a little tighter. Clara stood and walked to the window, watching the city outside. "My family owns real estate. Hotels mostly, resorts. I grew up in boardrooms more than bedrooms." Kieran looked up. "I'm not good at normal," she continued. "I don't always know how to be around people who don't want something from me." "Well," he said, "I don't want anything." "I know," she said, turning to face him. "That's what scares me. Later, after lunch, Clara helped Violet tie a ribbon around her cardboard spaceship. She crouched beside her on the floor, laughing as Violet explained how it could fly to the moon if they just had more glitter. "You're good with her," Kieran said, folding the dish towel. "I like kids," Clara replied. "They don't pretend." He watched her tie the ribbon with careful fingers, like the moment mattered. It struck him how strange it was to see someone like her in his space, barefoot now, sleeves rolled up, laughing like she didn't have a million things waiting for her somewhere else. "You're not like I expected," he admitted. She looked up. "What did you expect? Someone who'd panic and never look back?" "I almost didn't come," she said, "but I couldn't stop thinking about how calm you were. Like you could hold a storm in your hands." He didn't know what to do with that, so he went back to wiping the counter. As she left that afternoon, Clara paused at the door, keys in hand. "I have a dinner next week. It's formal. The kind where people talk about hedge funds and mergers." "Sounds thrilling," he said dryly. "I want you to come," he blinked. "Me, in a suit? I'll take care of the suit. Just say you'll be there." He looked at Violet, who had fallen asleep on the couch with glitter in her hair. "All right," he said. "But you're warning them I eat like a truck driver. I'll tell them to hide the breadbasket." She leaned up and kissed his cheek. It was quick, tentative, but it lingered like a promise. And then she was gone, leaving only the scent of her perfume and a half-eaten strawberry on the table. Kieran tugged at the collar of the charcoal gray suit jacket again, already regretting saying yes. The fabric was smooth, expensive in a way that made him feel like he was borrowing someone else's life. Clara had it delivered that morning, along with polished black dress shoes, a white shirt that actually fit his shoulders, and a tie he still hadn't figured out how to tie properly. He stood in the narrow hallway by his front door, staring at the mirror nailed crookedly to the wall. Violet sat on the couch behind him, kicking her feet while watching a cartoon. Their neighbor, Sherry, was babysitting tonight. She lived 2 doors down and had 3 kids of her own, so when Kieran asked, she just said, "Go have a night. Don't worry about a thing." The doorbell rang. Kieran opened it to Clara standing in a navy gown that shimmered like water under moonlight. Her earrings caught the porch light, tiny flickers of silver that made her look like she belonged on a movie screen. Her hair was swept back, lips painted in a shade that made his throat dry. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at him. "I wasn't sure if the suit would fit," she said finally, her voice softer than usual. "It fits," he replied. "That's the problem." Clara laughed, the sound low and real. "You look better in it than half the men who'll be at this thing." He glanced back at Violet. "You sure you want me there?" "I don't want to go without you," she said simply. The car waiting outside wasn't anything like the battered rideshare sedans that usually passed through the neighborhood. This one was sleek, black, and clearly driven by a man who'd been trained to speak only when spoken to. Kieran slid in beside Clara, the scent of her perfume different tonight, something warmer, more grounded. The city glittered outside the window as they drove. Kieran pulled at his cuffs. "What exactly is this dinner?" "It's a fundraising gala," Clara said. "My family hosts it every year. Investors, board members, people who think they run the world. And you're bringing me to that. I'm not looking for approval," she said. "I'm bringing you because I want you next to me." The venue was a glass and stone behemoth on the edge of the river, lit from the inside like a lantern. Kieran stepped out of the car and felt the temperature drop with the wind off the water. Clara took his hand without hesitation and led him up the steps. Inside, the room buzzed with quiet murmurs and the clink of crystal. Waiters in black vests glided through the crowd with trays of things Kieran couldn't pronounce. He kept his hand in Clara's as they moved through the room, her presence keeping him anchored. An older man with salt and pepper hair and a tailored tuxedo approached them, glass of champagne in hand. "Clara," he said, kissing her cheek. "Didn't expect to see you tonight." "I wasn't planning to come," she said, but plans changed. His eyes shifted to Kieran. "And who's this?" "This is Kieran," Clara said. "He's with me." The man's brows lifted a fraction. "Ah, well. Welcome." He moved on, but not before giving Kieran a look that landed somewhere between confusion and dismissal. Kieran leaned in. "Friend of the family, my father's finance advisor," she said under her breath. He thinks everyone's usefulness is measured by their net worth. Kieran exhaled through his nose. I'm gonna be real useful tonight then. Clara turned to him. You don't have to be anyone but yourself. I didn't bring you here to play dress up. A woman in a red gown who looked like she hadn't smiled in years stopped beside them, her eyes narrowing. Clara, she said, her tone clipped. You look different. Different how, Meredith? Relaxed, I suppose. Must be the company. Clara's fingers tightened around Kieran's. Maybe it is. They moved away before anyone else could approach. Kieran stopped beside a long table covered in miniature appetizers that looked more like artwork than food. You sure you're okay? Clara asked. I've been stared at less in court, he muttered. She laughed again, more freely this time. That's because you're the only real person in this room. A waiter appeared with a tray of champagne flutes. Kieran took one, mostly so he'd have something to do with his hands. Clara didn't touch hers. My mother used to fill hers with soda water, Clara said, watching the bubbles rise in his glass. She hated champagne, but she liked blending in. She here tonight? Clara shook her head. She passed away 4 years ago, lung cancer. I'm sorry, I'm not, Clara said, surprising him. Not because I didn't love her, but because she finally stopped pretending to be someone she wasn't. The last 6 months of her life were the only time I saw her laugh without checking who was watching. Kieran didn't speak, just touched her elbow. She leaned into his side, the contact subtle but grounding. A voice crackled over the speakers, announcing the beginning of the dinner program. Clara led Kieran to a table near the front, where place cards bore last names that sounded like law firms. His was written in elegant cursive, just Kieran, nothing else. As the speeches began, Clara leaned over. I hate this part. Why? Because all they talk about is legacy, as if legacy can't be built from kindness. Kieran turned to her. What do you want to build? She looked at him then, the noise around them fading. Something real. The lights dimmed for the keynote speaker. Kieran listened, but only half. Clara's hand rested on her lap, and he reached for it. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She just looked at him like she didn't care who saw. After the final applause, people stood to mingle again. Clara pulled him aside, her eyes glowing under the chandelier light. I have a place I want to show you, she said. He followed her through a side corridor, past a velvet rope and up a narrow staircase until they emerged onto a rooftop terrace. The city stretched out below them, endless and alive. This is where I used to hide as a kid, she said. When I couldn't breathe. Kieran stepped beside her, the wind tugging at his collar. You come here often? Not in years, she said, but I remembered it tonight and I wanted to be here with you. He looked at her then, really looked. Why me, Clara? She didn't blink. Because you saw me when I was invisible, and you didn't look away. He leaned in, one hand brushing her cheek. I don't think I could have looked away if I tried. Their lips met, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't need to rush. When they pulled apart, the city kept moving, but for once, neither of them did. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt out of place. Kieran stood in the sliding glass doorway of Clara's penthouse, barefoot on polished marble, watching as she arranged pastries on a platter like it was second nature. The sky beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows was streaked in orange and pink, the horizon softening into dusk. It had been 5 days since the gala, and he still couldn't believe this place was hers. You do this every morning, he asked, stepping inside, the scent of espresso curling around him. Clara glanced up from the platter. Only when I'm trying to avoid my inbox. He grinned and leaned against the counter. You've got a whole coffee bar, that's not normal. I'm aware, she said, sliding a cup across to him. But normal has never really applied. Violet appeared from the hallway, still wearing one of Clara's oversized t-shirts knotted at the side. Her curls were tied up in a loose bun, and she was holding a sketch pad. I drew you a spaceship, she announced, handing it to Clara. Clara accepted it like it was a priceless artifact. This is going in a frame. Violet beamed, then wandered back to the living room, leaving a trail of colored pencils behind her. Kieran took a sip of coffee. She's more comfortable here than I expected. Clara leaned on the island, watching Violet settle onto a velvet chaise. That's because you made her feel safe first. I'm just borrowing that trust. He studied her for a moment. She wasn't wearing makeup and her hair was still damp from the shower. There was something unguarded in the way she moved through the space, like she'd finally stopped performing. "I caught your name on a building yesterday," he said. "Clara Norwood, top of the real estate tower on 5th, she didn't flinch. "My father had it added after I joined the board. Said it was time people knew who was actually running things." "Is that what you want?" Clara was quiet for a beat. "It's not what I don't want, but I also want to build something that's mine." Kieran nodded, running his thumb along the edge of the ceramic cup. "You ever think about leaving it?" "I used to," she said. "But I realized I don't want to escape it, I want to reshape it." He looked at her then, really looked. "You're brave." Clara smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending to be someone else." A chime echoed through the apartment as the elevator arrived. Clara tensed slightly, glancing at the clock. "That'll be my father," she said under her breath. "I asked him to meet you." Kieran straightened but didn't move. "You didn't think to mention that before." "I didn't want to give you time to talk yourself out of it." The doors opened, and a tall man stepped into the room, impeccably dressed in deep gray, his silver cufflinks gleaming. He had the kind of presence that made a room feel smaller. "Clara," he said, kissing her cheek, "and this must be the man I've heard so little about." Kieran stepped forward and shook his hand. "Kieran Sullivan." The man's gaze was assessing. "You fix things for a living?" "Used to," Kieran replied. "Now I mostly build." Clara crossed her arms. "You didn't come here to interrogate him." "I came to understand," her father said. "You've made choices lately that don't align with what we discussed." "That's because I've changed." He turned to Kieran. "What are your intentions with my daughter?" Kieran didn't waver. "To be honest with her. To protect what matters, and to never make her feel less than exactly who she is." There was a silence that stretched into something taut. Her father studied him another moment, then nodded. "That's more than most have offered." After he left, Clara let out a breath and leaned against the counter. "He's not usually that cordial," she said. "I think he knows you're not walking away from this." She looked up. "I'm not." Later that night, after Violet had fallen asleep in the guest room with the city glowing outside the window, Kieran stepped onto the balcony with Clara. The air was cool, the breeze tugging at her robe. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You never asked me why I was in that parking lot the day we met. You didn't seem like you wanted to talk about it." "I just walked out of a meeting where the board voted to override a housing project I'd been working on for 2 years. Affordable units, childcare facilities, the whole thing. They didn't see the value." Kieran turned toward her. "So you panicked." "I felt helpless," she said. "Like I'd spent years proving I could change things and none of it mattered." "You matter," he said. "You didn't need to prove anything to me." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "I know that now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I didn't plan this," he said, "but I know what I want." Clara's breath caught. He opened the box to reveal a thin silver ring. Simple, quiet, whole. "I can't promise yachts or penthouses," he said. "But I can promise that I'll show up. Every day. For you, for Violet, for whatever we build." She didn't speak. She just nodded, tears slipping over her cheeks. He slid the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that tasted like salt and something brand new. "I don't want a different life," Clara whispered. "I just want this one with you." 3 months later, in a garden Clara designed herself, surrounded by wildflowers and mismatched chairs, and 100 people who actually mattered. Kieran stood beside her in a suit that finally felt like his, as Violet walked down the aisle tossing glitter instead of petals. When Clara reached him, she took both his hands and said, "You didn't just save me that day. You gave me somewhere to land." He kissed her before the officiant even started speaking, and she laughed into his mouth like the world had finally tilted in the right direction. And this time there was no panic, just love and something solid beneath their feet. A soft knock at the bedroom door pulled Kieran from sleep. Morning light spilled through the curtains, golden and quiet. He sat up, running a hand over his face. "Come in." Clara stepped inside, barefoot in a linen robe, her hair still damp from the shower. She held a paper in her hand, folded twice. Her expression wasn't anxious or excited, just thoughtful. "I found this in the mail downstairs," she said, offering it to him. "It's from the city council." He took it, unfolding the page and scanning the letter. His brows rose slowly. "They approved the redevelopment grant." "They did," Clara said. For the East Hollow project, all of it. The workshops, the daycare center, the co-op grocery. Everything we pitched. Kieran lowered the paper. I didn't think they'd go for it. They wouldn't have, she said, perching on the edge of the bed. Not until you stood in that meeting last month and told them what it meant for families like yours. Like Violet's, he looked at her, still stunned. You really think that changed their minds? I think you did more with 5 minutes and a folding chair than most people do with a decade and a boardroom, she said. And they listened. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. So, we're building it. We are, she said. Together. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it settling in like something sacred. Then Violet's voice echoed faintly from the hallway. Daddy, I can't find my shoes. Clara laughed and stood. I'll help her. Kieran smiled and watched her go, heart full. Later that afternoon, Clara led him through an empty lot tucked between 2 brick buildings. The air smelled like dust and grass. A breeze rustled the tarp on the chain-link fence. She wore jeans and a white t-shirt, clipboard in hand. Surveyors finish next week, she said. Then we break ground. He looked around, trying to picture it. What made you choose this block? Clara glanced toward the corner. There's a public school 2 streets over, a clinic around the bend, and 3 bus routes within walking distance. It's where people already live. I didn't want to build somewhere for the sake of optics. I wanted to build where it mattered. He turned to her. You always know exactly what to say. No, she said. I just stopped saying what people expected. As they walked back to the car, Clara paused in front of a small storefront with a faded awning. The windows were dusty, but inside, a few old books and cracked teacups still sat on the shelves. I've been thinking about buying this place, she said. Kieran looked at her. For what? I don't know yet. Maybe a bookstore, maybe a community hub, something quiet, something honest. You'd run it. I'd hire someone who believes in it, she said, but I'd be there. I want to be part of something that doesn't require a title or a quarterly report. He studied the building, then her. You're serious? I am, he nodded once. Then I'm in. That night, back in the penthouse, Clara tucked Violet into bed with a new book and a kiss on the forehead. When she returned to the living room, Kieran was waiting on the couch with something behind his back. She raised an eyebrow. What's that? He pulled out a small photo in a simple black frame. It was a candid someone had taken at the groundbreaking ceremony 2 days prior. Clara smiling, mid-laugh, dirt on her jeans, and Kieran holding Violet, who was wearing a hard hat 2 sizes too big. I thought maybe it should go on the shelf, he said. Next to all the press plaques and charity awards. Clara took the frame, her fingers brushing the glass. This is the only one that matters. She set it on the middle shelf. He stood and crossed the room, winding his arms around her waist. She leaned into him. I never thought I'd have this, she murmured. Have what? A life that feels honest. A partner who doesn't expect me to perform. A future that isn't already decided. You've got it now, he whispered. I know. They kissed, slow and certain, the city glowing behind them. A year later, the East Hollow Center was fully operational. The grand opening was a blur of music, speeches, and clapping children. Clara wore a sundress and flats, Kieran in rolled sleeves and worn boots. Violet cut the ribbon herself, beaming like she owned the place. After the ceremony, they walked through the community garden hand in hand. Rows of vegetables stretched out beside them, kids running across the grass. I want to start something else, Clara said. Kieran raised an eyebrow. Another project, a foundation, she said, not for real estate. For education grants. For parents like you who never finished school because they didn't have time to breathe. He stopped walking. You've thought about this. For months, she said. I want every decision I make from now on to mean something. He kissed her in the middle of the garden, dirt under their feet and sunlight in their hair. Violet shrieked from across the yard, chasing a butterfly with a paper net. You know what I love most? Clara asked. Tell me. That none of this would have happened if I hadn't fallen apart in a parking lot. He smiled. Sometimes falling apart is the best thing that can happen. That night, they lay in bed with the windows open, the sounds of the city humming below. Violet was curled up in her room, a new storybook on the nightstand. As Clara traced lazy circles on Kieran's shoulder, she whispered, You still think you're just a builder? He turned toward her. I think I'm yours. She kissed his chest, her voice warm. And I'm yours. They fell asleep like that, tangled in sheets in each other, the past behind them and the future wide open. And for the first time in both their lives, nothing needed fixing. Everything was exactly as it should be.